You've always carried a quiet compass inside, an almost imperceptible radar that hums beneath the surface of your skin, directing you toward truths unspoken. You've slipped into crowded rooms and felt a tremor in the air before a word was uttered, sensed the tremble of fear behind a practiced grin, witnessed a flicker of pain in eyes that refused to shed tears. But somewhere along the way, you lost faith in those whispers. You were taught to prize logic, to anchor yourself in spoken assurances, to trust the face we all polish for strangers. And so the undercurrents slipped from your sight, hiding their messages beneath polished gestures and well-rehearsed laughter. Yet, beneath every tremor of the smile lies a story waiting to be unveiled. Carl Jung once said that our habits and masks are nothing more than languages of the unspoken self, symbols of old battles fought in the shadows of our minds. Every quirk, every nervous tick, every tale we retell until its edges fray, it's all a cipher of some buried ache. You don't need a manual of cold interrogation to see it. You only need the courage to notice the silences most rush past. A sudden catch in the voice, a hesitation before a reply, a burst of laughter so full it rattles the calm. These moments are not accidents. They're leaks in the dam, small escapes of something the wearer hopes will go unnoticed. When you learn to meet those pauses without pressing for explanation, without offering pat solutions, you begin to feel the pulse of the wounded heart beneath the shield. People rarely don't want to reveal themselves. They tremble at the thought that what roils beneath the surface might not earn the warmth of acceptance. They hide, not out of deceit, but vulnerability. And when you learn to look past the mask with empathy rather than suspicion, something softens inside you. You discover that humanity isn't a facade to be unmasked. It's a fragile bloom that unfurls only when met with gentleness. In every conversation, beneath the confident tongue, lies a current of survival. Jung observed that we don't speak from our fullest selves. We speak from the versions we've rehearsed to stay safe. Words become armor, polished and perfected, shielding the raw core that we fear would crack under the weight of judgment. Consider the woman who dominates every gathering, with a brilliance that stuns. She commands attention. Her anecdotes fly like sparks, igniting every ear. Yet in the quiet lulls, her gaze drifts to the door. Her hand tightens around her glass, and her breath hitches when someone mentions childhood days. These aren't random gestures. They're the body's rebellion against a performance refined to perfection. Jung called masks strategies, and not lies, measures the soul takes to weather a world unprepared for unvarnished depth. When you grasp that, you stop chastising the performance and start sensing the fear that fuels it. You begin to respond to the person behind the spotlight instead of the spotlight itself. Projection, Jung taught, is the mirror we hold up to others, reflecting the traits we've banished in ourselves. When someone rails against arrogance in others, it often means they long for a measure of power themselves, but fear its pull. When someone laments dishonesty with fervor, they may be fleeing from truths they've yet to face within. Our sharpest judgments are rarely about the world. They are echoes of the shadows we carry inside. Picture a man who sneers at tears, calls them weakness with a practiced smirk. Beneath that smirk lies a child who once sobbed before a person he loved and was met with mocking laughter. The wound never healed, and now every gesture of softness in others awakens a tender ache he still deems intolerable. This is the paradox of the human heart. We exile what we fear will fracture us, then lash out at those who carry it, as though their openness offends us. Yet in these outbursts lies a map, Every criticism points toward the hidden chambers of our own psyche. If you learn to read those maps with compassion, rather than condemnation, you won't just understand another person. You'll sense who they've been terrified to become. There is a language in silence, too. We're conditioned to trust the spoken, to hang on polished phrases, to infer honesty from clarity. But often the most telling moments live between the words. A pause before a painful subject, a swift change of topic, the slender space where laughter comes to fill the gap. Each is a threshold into the unspoken self. When someone hastily dismisses a memory as fine, notice the breath that catches in their chest. Listen to the fraction of a second where their mask quivers. Silence is not nothing. It is a vessel for innumerable truths. If you offer presence instead of pressure, the hidden currents will rise. You'll notice grief drifting through their stillness, shame wrapped in that quiet, memories hovering like ghosts. Jung suggested that silence strips away the collective defenses, allowing the unconscious to speak without fear of judgment. When you attend to these moments, you learn that people are silent not to hide malice, but to guard wounds still tender from healing. Beware the one whose moral certitude thunders from every word. When virtue is proclaimed with the force of a battle cry, it has often slipped from sacred to performative. Jung cautioned that purity of image can masquerade as righteousness, protecting a soul wary of confronting its own darkness. See the person who lectures on kindness, yet shuns dissent, whose kind words turn sharp at the slightest question. There you'll find a fear of the parts of themselves they aren't ready to forgive. True goodness resides in quiet consistency, in unseen acts of care that need no audience. The soul seeks sincerity, not applause. When someone shouts their virtues, pause to wonder which shadows they're outrunning. Self-deception, Jung taught, is not born of intent to harm, but of an instinct to survive. A person may insist they're fine with a smile that doesn't touch their eyes, claim they've moved on while flinching at a familiar name. They're not lying to trap you. They're telling the story they had to embrace just to journey forward. And even the most elaborate script leaks truth in the pauses, the sudden skip in their tone, the fragmented sentences, the change of subject when comfort should bloom. If you want to understand them, don't scorn the lie. Trace the need that wove it. Beneath each thread of self-deception lies a truth too heavy to carry alone, a shard of sorrow seeking a gentle hand to bear it. When you grasp this, you stop demanding transparency and offer a haven instead, knowing healing springs not from exposure, but from the quiet space where one can choose a new narrative. Sometimes the loudest voice is the one most desperate to be heard by itself. Jung recognized that those who broadcast their greatness often do so from a well of insecurity, whispering that they are not enough. They parade their triumphs like royal garments, desperate for confirmation that the person beneath the finery still matters. You've seen them. The colleague who interrupts every pause to prove their acumen, the friend who glazes their life in curated perfection, each post a plea masked as pride. These aren't villains. They're children of an old wound, draping themselves in borrowed confidence to ward off the fear of being forgotten. Understanding this shifts your gaze. You no longer see arrogance. You see longing. You no longer bear their performance as an affront, but witness it as a plea for connection. And in that witnessing, you free yourself from taking their armor personally. You begin to read the tremor behind the roar, sensing the fragile soul beneath. There are those who build fortresses of control, rendering every inch of their world immovable, and precise. They make lists for departures, timetables for meals, routes for walks, as though by orchestrating each moment, they can forestall the chaos that once swallowed them whole. Their discipline appears enviable, but if you peer beyond the facade, you'll glimpse sleepless nights haunted by a single misstep, panic when plans derail, and an unspoken terror of unpredictability. Jung saw such rigidity as a testament not to strength, but to a heart battling storms beneath the placid surface. Control is a shield, not a trophy. When you meet someone who refuses to relinquish the reins, ask not what they seek to master in the world, but which chaos inside they tremble to feel. Because behind their unyielding order lies a soul desperate for safe harbor. Music. In a world that demands performance, many forget the simple grace of presence. The person who seems to illuminate every room with laughter may, in the lull that follows, feel the shadows gather hungrily around their unguarded heart. Once the applause fades, they slip down against a wall and tremble at the echo of silence, fearful that without noise they might vanish entirely. Jung's teaching reminds us that to truly see someone is not to judge their mask, but to honor the ache it conceals. You begin to listen, not just with your ears, but with your whole being, attuned to the subtle language of the soul seeking recognition. And in that recognition, there is healing, for them and for you. They say the mirror never lies, but it only reflects the surface. What if the truest reflection comes when we stop staring at our own image and begin to see the world beyond? When you watch someone hesitate at a crossroads, whether literal or emotional, notice the subtle shiver in their stance. It's the echo of every time they stood alone, unsure whom to trust, afraid to choose the path that might expose them. Each moment of indecision carries the weight of 1,000 past what-ifs, ghosts of choices that once turned into regrets. And when you respond with a steady presence rather than a push, in the end, the greatest mastery isn't in the art of revelation, but in the art of acceptance. It lies not in exposing the hidden corners of another's soul, but in illuminating them with unwavering kindness. You become the mirror that doesn't distort or judge, but allows every facet to glimmer in its own light. This is your invitation: to remain curious, to remain compassionate, to honor every mask as a map, every silence as a song. And as you learn to read the language of others, you'll find yourself finally reading the most important story of all, the one written on the walls of your own heart. You glance across a room and see not just faces, but fragments of stories. The confident posture, the firm handshake, the unwavering eye contact. They speak of victories won, but also of battles fought in secret. Think about the colleague who never asks for help, always ready with a quick joke to deflect any hint of weakness. It's tempting to chalk that up to self-sufficiency. But what if, beneath the humor, there lies a child who learned early that needs were punishments? In every polished exchange, there echoes the imprint of past survival tactics, ancestral scripts stamped into muscle memory. Our patterns are not random quirks. They're the rehearsed movements of roles we once had to embody. The caretaker who anticipates emotions before they're voiced was often a child scanning adult moods for signs of danger. The perfectionist who beats down every flaw in their work was likely a young heart, convinced that only flawless performance could earn love. When you begin to read these echoes, every gesture transforms into a gateway. A slight flinch when praise arrives, a quiver in the voice before sharing joy. These are clues to buried chapters, longing for a gentle witness. Envy, too, is a secret storyteller. When someone undermines another's success with snide remarks or veiled criticisms, it isn't purely malice, it's a severed longing. They see in that other person the freedom they once craved, but dared not claim. Imagine a peer who constantly downplays your achievements, calling them luck or flukes. What if their barbed humor masks the ache of unfulfilled ambition, the whisper of, "That could have been me"? They can't bear to speak. Envy isn't a sign of your greatness. It's a confession of their own unrealized self. When you recognize this, your response shifts from defensiveness to compassion. You begin to hold space for the wound envy has carved. And what of belief itself? We like to think logic guides our convictions, but Jung taught that most of us build philosophies from the rubble of past betrayals. The cynic who insists people can't be trusted is often a heart still stung by a promise broken long ago. The skeptic who ridicules faith may once have knelt in hope, only to find their prayers unanswered. Behind every absolutist stance lies an unhealed fracture, trying to be sealed with certainty. If you listen for the undercurrent, listen not to the force of conviction, but to the tremor beneath it, you'll find the tender remnant of a faith or trust that needs compassion more than critique. Control is another tale in disguise. Those who demand order around them do so to quell an inner tempest. The person who micromanages every detail may be warding off memories of chaos that once swallowed them. They fill every second with structure to silence the echoes of unpredictability that terrify them. Watch their eyes when plans shift unexpectedly. See how quickly the blood flushes their cheeks, how they bite their lip to hold back a surge of panic. That orchestrated calm is a patchwork over a soul that still remembers what it was like to be lost in a world that refused to bend. When you meet such rigidity with gentle flexibility, offering a small concession, allowing for a minor glitch without alarm, you gift them a glimpse of safety beyond control. Projection is perhaps the most revealing cipher. Every time someone hurls harsh judgment, they're launching an arrow toward a part of themselves they can't bear to look at. When the coworker rails against arrogance, watch how their knuckles whiten with intensity. That's not righteous indignation. It's a mirror pointing back to a self they've tried to excise. When the friend condemns oversharing, notice how they avert their gaze at raw confession. That recoil isn't scorn, it's fear of confronting their own vulnerability. Projection isn't a flaw, it's a plea for wholeness. If you can answer that plea with acceptance rather than retribution, you open a door for reconciliation within their fractured psyche. There's a moment in every relationship when you cross from observer to healer, simply by choosing curiosity over correction. When your partner hesitates telling you something painful, you don't pounce with solutions. You lean in with questions that hold weight, that say, "I want to know you, even the parts you guard." When a friend snaps in irritation, you don't snap back. You notice the tremor in their tone and say, "You seem on edge. Want to talk about it?" That kind of presence doesn't require expertise, only the humility to admit you don't have to fix everything to be the remedy. In fact, the greatest healing often comes not from grand gestures, but from the quiet constancy of your availability. A check-in message, a shared coffee without agenda, remembering a small detail that mattered to them. These are the threads that stitch new patterns into the fabric of their lives. You become part of a living tapestry of repair, weaving compassion where once was only defense. This practice of reading beneath the skin eventually turns inward. As you learn to sense the unspoken stories of others, the loneliness masked by busyness, the fear swathed in bravado, you begin to unearth your own hidden narratives. You notice the way your chest constricts when someone challenges you, how you deflect with humor when you feel exposed, how you recoil at compliments with a half smile. These aren't mere personality quirks. They're invitations to your own self-awareness, clues to the corners of your being that crave gentle exploration. And so the skill becomes sacred reciprocity. You read them, you heal them, and in that very act, you read yourself and heal yourself. The lines between reader and read start to blur until there is only witnessing, uninterrupted presence, bathing two souls in the same illuminating light. Perhaps you've felt this in fleeting moments. A tear welling in someone else's eye, and your own heart softening before a word is spoken. A gesture of kindness that ripples through you as though you were the recipient. A shared silence so deep it reverberates with mutual understanding. In these spaces, you transcend the roles of observer and observed. You become a living conduit of empathy, and what you witness becomes part of your own story. There is an alchemy in this. Every time you hold another's vulnerability without flinching, you transform a wound into a bridge. A bridge connects separated shores, past and present, masked and unmasked, fear and possibility. On that bridge, healing flows both ways. You carry a lamp for them, and they carry one for you. What will you do with this gift? Perhaps you'll bring it into a friendship that's gone quiet, leaning in to listen without agenda. Maybe you'll offer it to a family member who's always been distant, meeting their armor with gentle curiosity. You might even bring it to strangers, offering a smile that says, "I see you," in a world that's quickest to look away. Because ultimately, our common humanity resides not in what we proclaim, but in what we conceal. We all carry chambers of unspoken pain, corridors of survival tactics, balconies where longing watches for wings. When you learn to navigate these inner landscapes in others, with tenderness, patience, and respect, you begin to navigate your own. You realize that the true journey isn't about unmasking every face, but about remembering the faces behind the masks, starting with your own. So go on. Notice the half smiles, the guarded laughter, the breath that hesitates on a vulnerable word. Let each observation be an offering, each question a gesture of care. And as you read the language of the hidden, you'll discover a deeper fluency in compassion, a richer vocabulary of presence, and the unspoken truth that healing is not a solitary path, but a shared pilgrimage of hearts.